Please pardon my nervous energy because I'm not used to speaking in front of people. But then they said this was about failure, so I got this lucky break. It looks like I'm here to be the last word on failure. But, well, my failure rate in life is 99%. I made a calculation some time back about pretty much everything I've done. So I don't know, it could be because one takes more risks, it could be because one is not good enough, it could be because one has personality flaws, it could be because the world is not ready for, or the world is not in sync with what you have to offer. I don't know what it is, and I'm sure all of you have different answers to this same disquiet. So I'm here to talk about a property that I developed in 2009, and it's really weird that I'm speaking in an event called Impact Failure, because my property was called Impact Index, and yeah, it lasted about 9 years, and I am here to just speak about its journey and all the things that happen, and I'll try to make it as interesting as I can. I hope. I know this is football season, but I hope some of you like cricket. So I'll keep it very, very, very general. So I'll start. For a long time, I have been, as a cricket fan, I had this disquiet about how cricketers were being judged as individuals. Cricket is ultimately a team sport. It's not an individual sport. It's not, but people, the way we discuss cricket statistics or the way we decide what determines a player's worth is seen in an individual context. He's made this many runs, this thing, that, all tally stats, context-less tally stats. So it's kind of, and it began to get really, really ridiculous. And my introduction, which we actually hadn't conferred on the introduction. I mean, so it's a pleasant surprise for me. Was actually Sachin Tendulkar because for a long time, and I'm sure those of you who have followed cricket would remember how the 194 not out that happened in 2004 when his captain declared because he was batting too slowly, and there were instances of that earlier also. The drama that happened around his 100th where India lost that game because he played too slowly because he wanted to score his 100th. But there is one particular instance that nobody has ever spoken about, which made me angriest about about what he did. And I'm just going to very quickly recall that. This is the famous Monkey Gate Test match in Sydney in 2008. India had made 501 for 9. India had a 38-run lead. And Sachin Tendulkar was batting on 146 not out at that time. And Ishant Sharma was the number 11 at that time. He had played just a handful of games. He was absolutely new to international cricket. His batting average was something like 6 or something. And he came out to join Sachin Tendulkar. And normally what would you expect in a situation like that? You would expect the batsman who is set, let alone somebody who's 146 not out, to farm the strike, to take the strike and score as many runs, because India was, 38 runs ahead. So, we could have been 70, 80, 90, whatever. One expects the specialist batsman to take the strike. Sachin Tendulkar, off the first ball of the over, he used to take a single, and he did it 5 times in a row to give Ishant Sharma the strike. Now, this was absurd enough as it was. What was really crazy was how the commentators started talking around it. Nobody wanted to address it directly. And I was listening to both Hindi and Hindi commentary on radio at that time, because I wanted to know, is anyone talking about this? Because this was so blatant. The Hindi commentator at one point says, maybe Tendulkar wants to stay not out, which increases your average. Nobody else said this. Then anyway, Ishant Sharma, as number 11, played double the number of balls, almost double the number of balls that Sachin Tendulkar played. they added 31 runs between them, where Ishant Sharma got 23 and Sachin Tendulkar got 8. And then Ishant Sharma got out. And then Sachin Tendulkar was called to the commentator's box where Harsha Bogle and Wasim Akram were there. And they had that, it was a great innings. He was 154 not out, of course, all that. And then they asked him, but why did you, right at the end, and he probably deliberately asked him this as the last question, because who knows what he would have done otherwise. Why were you taking a single and giving the ball, the strike to Ishant Sharma? And he said, because the field was spread out for me, and the field was, had come in for Ishant Sharma, so there were more gaps in the field. Look, that's rubbish. That's a nonsense thing to say. And Wasim Akram said, oh, that is how great players think. He said this on air, okay? Now that's when I realized that this is the future of cricket, and that future has come to pass, by the way. And I'm talking 2008. Then the other thing was that there is another cricketer who was in the same team who wasn't getting the same. See, Sachin Tendulkar was a god in 2008. You could not actually even criticize him. You couldn't say anything about him. But there was another cricketer in the same team taking on much tougher challenges and making a much greater fist of it, which was Rahul Dravid. He used to bat at 3. He took on much tougher challenges, but he wasn't getting the same credit. So my whole thing started, I just wanted to see what happens when you compare Dravid and Tendulkar. It just started like that. And we just look at the big matches, where it either affects the series or even just in the match, when you come up with a big performance under pressure. And it was very interesting because I found that, on a very qualitative level, Dravid came out on top. So I actually did a sort of a qualitative kind of a study, and this wasn't my profession, I should add. I'm a writer, filmmaker, and at that time I was still doing that. And so this was just for fun, and also if we could get some, I wasn't really very commercially successful as that, and in that sense. So the company I used to work for, I was trying to, we had a cricket website, so I just put it out. And we ranked the top 20 Indian cricketers of all time, and Dravid came out on top. And in 2008, Sachin Tendulkar was having a bad run. He came 4th, which was a shocker for everyone who saw that. And Hindustan Times put it on the front page of their national edition, which was, in February 2009. And that's when I got a call from, and this is how lives change with these innocuous little things. I got a call from the ICC, the International Cricket Council, saying, we have just seen your Indian study. Could you do a similar study for us? Because we are going to finish 100 years at the ICC. And will you come to Oxford to do a presentation on this during our conference? So without thinking, I said yes. But then when I sat down to actually do the exercise, I realized it would be a farce, because, a qualitative exercise of this scale would be a bit of a farce. So I decided to try to see if we could do some kind of a quantitative thing. And I guess I used something that I was familiar with, which is, let's say, film rating. So you look at a scorecard, and you look at a performance within the context of that match. And I started giving, like you give 5-star ratings for a film, I started giving star ratings for each performance in each thing. And even with this, the findings were amazing, were very interesting. So there were 3 of us. We actually manually went through every single scorecard of every single test match that has ever been played, which is, I think at that time was about, 2,200 or something. And we got these incredible, very interesting findings, and we went to Oxford, and it was just for fun. But in Oxford, what happened was, after the presentation, there were lots of people there whose books I had read when I was young, as a student of the game. Some of them actually came up. I remember the former president of the New Zealand Cricket Board, this gentleman called Don Neely, who died recently. He came up and he actually told me this. That's when it shook me. He said, what you're doing is something nobody has ever done. We have talked about this, using context of every match and every series, but nobody's ever done this. So don't give it up. Because I think he heard me say, or maybe from my vibe, he felt that I was just doing this casually. So that's when it struck me. And then, IPL had happened. So T20 stats mean even less than normal test stats. Now I'm going to just cut a long story short. This is the build-up. The story now is I came back in 2009 from Oxford, and for the next 8 years, I worked on this. I planned to work on this for 8 months or 6 months. I ended up working on this for 8 years. I gave up everything else I was doing. And for the first 4 years, I ran it with my own money, and I was broke at the end of it. I was borrowing money. And it was an insane time because even though, people have this notion that, oh, cricket is such a big sport and, it is so commercial. It is the biggest game in India and everything. And so it's very easy you'll be able to make money. It is actually the most, I worked in 6 industries in my life. It is by far the most unequal industry of all because a very small segment of people get everything and everybody else gets paid peanuts. So that's what it was, basically, and, setting up, and I'm sure all of you are people who have, come up with new ideas and tried to do something with them. You would know this and you would relate to this. In India, anybody who has come up with a new idea, it's like an Indian pedestrian trying to cross a busy road. Okay, nobody stops for you. This is not the first world. Nobody stops for you, and if it was legal, they'd run over you also. That's how India is. So if there were no traffic lights, if there were no traffic jams, I'm not sure any of us would really cross the road, alive in any case. And so that's how the ecosystem is in people, basically. And so I'm not going to go through all that because that'll take too much time. And it's not just, and what that did to me, and since we are talking about failure, what that did to me also was that I slowly began, which I didn't realize then, I began to have a siege mentality because people were constantly laughing you out of the room, basically. I remember I went to one IPL team and they said, they were very impressed by, what one had, and then they turn around and say that we'd like to be the second team to try this, not the first. Okay, so, nobody wants to be the first team to try this. Then I remember in Star TV, there was, we had a meeting in Star TV, and, that was quite a big opportunity for us, and he basically started saying, look, I want your numbers to be understood by everybody. If you want to use your numbers here, your numbers must be understood by everybody. So, he said, which I said is not possible. I mean, if everybody is not interested in getting into numbers, so why should it be accessible to everybody? I mean, it is accessible in the sense that anyone who's interested can examine it more closely, but why should everyone need to understand it? He said, no, my driver, my cook, my office peon, and my security guard needs to get it. So, see, this is the thing. So I said something like, oh, but then you don't need numbers, you need item numbers. Okay? See, you laughed. He didn't even laugh. And at least, that's one thing one tries to get out of meetings. That if nothing is happening, at least a couple of laughs, at least one can, that's... So this kind of thing kept happening. I had so many crazy such meetings. In fact, I've published a book, and the last chapter of the book, which is something that I had to fight to get on because I don't take names, but it's about all this whole journey. And all of this is there in that. There's much more. Anyway, so, and then what happened was that one got into as many of you, I'm sure you work with tech, and coders can be the most frustrating people in the world to work with, especially when they are not the most expensive ones, and so that's how it was, that drove one crazy and broke, but the intellectual curiosity kept me going. Fundamentally, that what would this system bring? Because occasionally when they would when the work used to happen, we used to find really interesting findings. So that's when it was a crazy thing to do in retrospect. I'm not even sure it's the right thing to do because I started using up all my savings and that one was hopeful that at some point somebody would buy it. And the funny thing was, people abroad in Australia and England were much more supporting of us than Indians were. Indians were the worst with us. They actually literally treated us like shit. We made I mean, the Australian Cricket Board interacted with me before, the Indian board never did. And, there are many things, we made, so I like to say this, that we made our international debut before before playing first class cricket. We had made our international debut. All this happened. Then what happened, thanks to that journey, in England, Wisden, which is the oldest entity in cricket in England, they bring out the almanac, the Wisden almanac. It's like the most you could say, the most prestigious entity in cricket. Their editor, who was the youngest editor of Wisden, he kind of took a shine to this. And eventually, Wisden India actually bought a majority stake from me in 2014. So that kind of solved my problems, the financial problems and all that. And Impact Index went into a new phase where we literally were the most written about and the most talked about alternative stat system in cricket. And there is none after that. Now, what was the most interesting thing about that was that one of our champions was actually Greg Chappell, the Australian captain who had come down to India. I had met him and I had spoken to him, and he asked me about his era. Who are the cricketers in his era, and what our system has to say about them. And I told him a few things about some of his teammates, and he said, they never got their due, what they did. So there was a batsman called Ian Redpath, who nobody remembered him now. So I told him how his contribution was really very significant. So we did a series of interviews with a lot of these people, and it was amazing to actually speak to them on phone. I used to call up and talk to them and tell them what our findings says. This is actually extremely moving to see players who had been forgotten, who had contributed so much, and their teammates knew what they had done, who had never got their due. They actually felt really moved that finally, somebody was actually acknowledging. And it's not just old cricketers. They were all around the world. For example, Ajit Wadekar, the Indian captain, his batting average is 31, I think. Nobody considers him to be a great batsman. Nobody who averages 31 in Test cricket will be considered a great batsman. But his performances came in such important matches that won India series. That his impact on in a manner in which it changed cricket history was immense. And he was also very moved. So there was a series of interviews we did. So that was, I hold that as the proudest moment for Impact, and that is something that is worth everything else that didn't work to be able to. The big problem with Impact was monetization, which is, of course, we don't value our children based on how gregarious they are, but how popular what you create is with people, whether people catch on or not, pretty much defines its reason of existence. And that's what it was. Now, we had things, and I still believe we have things that, for example, Impact Index can be used in broadcast very innovatively. It could make you actually look at it can make you look at cricket history differently. It can make you look at the game that you're watching differently. It can be used as branded content. It can be used, for team consultancy, like like forming a T20 side, like IPL teams, for gaming, for fantasy cricket. So basically, there are lots of things that we could have done. And we had some success with it. The problem was, and this is the other problem we had, because I had sold my stake to to Wisdom India. Wisdom India had veto power on the marketing team. Unfortunately, the person they hired for that, he was not. So what he did was, during the 2015 World Cup, we had all this content. He did an exclusive content with 2 TV channels, which is the most bizarre thing anyone can do. He did an exclusive thing with CNN, IBN, and with NewsX, and he didn't tell us. And I asked him that, listen, see, I stayed away from the commercial side. In retrospect, it's completely bonkers. He went and he lied to them. He said, this is exclusive to you. I think he expected them not to notice that it was playing on the other channel. And it's bizarre because we worked so hard for 1.5 months, the period of the 2015 World Cup, and we gave, in fact, my team was stationed in the NewsX office. And I think they also noticed that some of our stuff was coming on other channels, and they didn't tell us because ultimately neither channel paid. Nobody paid us for what we were doing. It's bizarre, but that's what happened. And now what? How does one control such a thing? I mean, these are people who get hired and they become marketing people and they do this. He was sacked after that, but he went smiling. So I don't know, maybe, I don't know how these things happen. So this is, I realized then, and then, our property was given to. See, this is the problem. I was focusing on the intellectual side of things and not really on the marketing side of things. In retrospect, that was a mistake because the monetization of any property is actually the most important thing. We should have spent more time on that, maybe made more effort to find better marketing people who were on the same page as us. But whatever, Sydney Thunder, for example, which is a team in the BBL, which is the Australian equivalent of the IPL, they hired us to actually consult with them, and they had come 7th out of 8 teams for the last 5 years before that. That year they won, the year we consulted with them. They won the tournament, and after that we have not worked with them. They have not reached the semifinals even once after that. I'm talking about 2016. That is when they won. We were simply not given credit. They put it up on their website that, Impact Index, a consultancy firm from Bangalore, because we were operating from Bangalore at that time, did this, but nothing after that. So, and we were not paid. See, this is how cricket is. Anybody trying to raise any property in the cricket world is, basically you have to do it out of your pocket, and you have to get lucky. Now, so Wisdom India was also losing money. They had their own operations, but they were also losing money. So they finally, put the whole intellectual property, they put a person in charge who was not really capable of it. So the whole thing shut down. The entire operations shut down. And intellectually, I think Impact Index did not even accomplish 30% of what it could have. Unfortunately, it needs a little money to run the back-end system. Otherwise, I would have run it as a hobby. But 9 years I had spent on this. So I don't know. Is it a cautionary tale for me? There are so many. Sure, one of the mistakes was that I had this tendency of I was not a very polite person in meetings. Like, my thing was, you do all the work and then you have to be polite also. I mean, no, because people say such crazy things and they are so rude and so dismissive of you, and then you have to kind of swallow that. All that is there, but the answer to that question is, if it is a question, yes, one has to swallow that, and I should have done that. Though I don't know if I can, but yeah. Or one should have a different face, a different kind of a person, and I'm a back-end person, let me be a back-end person. I always wanted to be a back-end person. As you can tell from my presentation, I am a back-end person. On a personal level also, I was a writer filmmaker, I had some success, and just at the very, very moment things were really working out, I started doing this full-time, which was crazy, and then when the whole thing shut down in 2018, I decided I would just write for 3-4 years, and which is what I've done. And now I find myself out of sync with the crime and dark world of Netflix, because that's the only kind of content that people are interested in buying. They don't want anything else. This is another session. And so anyway, so meanwhile, we have gone out, and stats has become a very big part of cricket, but in a very different way. It is stats that is accessible to everybody, and people have broken it down. It's granular, how many, matchups between players, and T20 cricket is very friendly with that kind of stats. But if you look at the larger picture, just like the world has become really dumb has dumbed down for sure in the last few years, cricket has dumbed down even more. Cricket is I say this and I'm coming to the end, so I will give you the reason why I'm saying this. Cricket is the lowest IQ major sport in the world today. Why? Because statistics is treated as trivia. When you watch a match, did any of you ask before the T20 World Cup, why are people telling us this guy needs 2 runs to score 3,000? This guy needs 4 wickets to make 150. Do you give a damn? Does anybody care who's got fun, whose career stats has 150 wickets or 3,000? This is a team sport. Nobody looks at cricket as a team sport. Also, the other thing that's happened with low attention spans is that it has become a sport of celebrity commenting. Now, cricketers are very good at talking about details, about granular details, how to bowl, what he's doing. But they are terrible when it comes to the big picture. There are some exceptions, but by and large, they are terrible when it comes to the big picture. So you have this Sunil Gavaskar, who, there is a lot to admire about him, but have you noticed how many times he says, oh, he's 2 runs away from 50? When it doesn't matter, when the team is losing, it doesn't matter. None of those things really matter. Then you have, if you have seen the 2019 World Cup final, New Zealand versus England, where the ball hit Ben Stokes and went for 4, and that suddenly everyone realized what a ridiculous rule that was, because when the ball hits a player, ricochets off a player, the batsmen don't run because it's considered bad manners to run on something that you haven't. But because the ball went for 4 and Ben Stokes went to the umpire and said, I don't want these runs, they said, no, you have to take it. And no, that's what it was. But here's the thing. Okay, they had a bad rule. They hadn't thought that this would. You know what? They haven't changed that rule 3 years later. They have not changed that rule 3 years later. And I have asked my friends in England, people who are in the MCC, what is going on? They say, oh, maybe it won't happen again. This is the crazy, this is crazy land. This sport is crazy land. I've always said this, that impact index is really a mindset. It's not a stat system. It's the mindset of knowing, of valuing context in a cricketing performance. Now, if this mindset was valued, and I'm coming to the end, all those who are saying that Virat Kohli did so well in the T20 World Cup, he was the highest scorer in the T20 World Cup. Virat Kohli is one of the main reasons India lost in this T20 World Cup. Despite scoring the maximum runs in the tournament. The reason is because 120 balls, you're not supposed to. How many times has a team been all out in 20 overs? How many teams have lost even 7 wickets in 20 overs? You've got somebody like who was not playing, but I'm just giving an example. Your tail enders, you've got Bumrah who scored 35 runs in 1 over in a test match. And the first 60%, the first 6 overs of your innings are power play overs. If your strike rate is not good in that, you are going to lose. India had the lowest strike rate in the tournament. There's only one team who had a lower strike rate than India in this tournament in the first 6 overs, and that was UAE. Not enough people talk, so we keep hailing. Virat Kohli is not a T20 player. RCB, for those who are familiar with the IPL, they know this, that RCB has never won a title in the last 3 years. Everybody knows Virat Kohli's strike rate has been very poor. Yet, he was picked in a side which has the best T20 batsman in the world, which is Surya Kumar Yadav. which is something we had actually said 3 years ago, that Surya Kumar Yadav, and yet Surya Kumar Yadav used to come out to bat after the strike, the power play is over. That's how crazy, and that's what I mean by mindset, that it's a mindset. Anyway, I'm going to end now. I'll just say one thing, that, what is there any satisfaction I have? One satisfaction is, of course, that I think we did make some people think a little differently on the game, even if we didn't last. Do I regret having done Impact Index, given that it's affected such a big part of my life otherwise? If we stay at only 30% of what we achieved and we never go beyond that, then yes, I would regret it. Maybe if in the future one can restart it, or somebody else restarts it with that little foundation that we laid, and takes it to some 70%, 80%, then I would not regret it. Then it's great. And the other thing is, speaking of satisfaction, I started with Rahul Dravid versus Sachin Tendulkar. In 2018, we had actually published that book, which HarperCollins published, with Akash Chopra, who's a former Test cricketer and commentator. He did a Twitter poll on his thing. This is 2018. Remember, in 2009, when we said Sachin Tendulkar was not the greatest Test cricketer, the greatest Test batsman to come out of India, people had freaked out and abused us and said a lot of things. But here's the thing. He did a Twitter poll, who is the greatest Test batsman in India ever? Dravid came out on top, ahead of Tendulkar. And that, we can take some part of starting that conversation. We can take some satisfaction from that. But is it enough? I don't know. And let's hope the mindset prevails in some way. That's it.